So you accepted the call for the family business, came back to join your father. Tell me about that first year and what you were doing, and if you remember names of dealerships that are still around, with anecdotes.
I remember the very first dealer I called on by myself. The deal was that Dad was going to take me around and introduce me to the dealers in my territory. But there just wasn't time. So he just said, well, okay, this guy, and I'm writing it down, this guy is on Old Highway 18, about 5 miles. Well, there's no sign out there that says Old Highway 18. There's no, back then there were no GPSs. There were no car phones, cell phones, things like that. So I just had to go find these guys. And so I show up, and in those days, a lot of salesmen wore sport coats and ties. And Dad always did, and he insisted on it. So here I am, this I'm sure I look like a city kid, although I wasn't a kid, but I'd been an attorney for 8 years. And I show up in a sport coat, tie, khakis or slacks, and I start trying to sell them farm equipment that they can tell with one look, I don't know diddle about. And the very first dealership I showed up at, I'm not going to name the dealership, but it was two brothers. They're not in business anymore. But they were coming out the front door as I pulled in. And they were fighting, as they usually were. And the one looked at me and said, "Who the hell are you?" And I told him, and he ordered me off, go. And he was not using good words. He was swearing at me to get lost. His brother was like, no, I need to order some boxes. So I'm sitting there writing the order on the roof of my Chevy Celebrity, my company car. And the one is still hollering at me and the other's telling me what he needs, and I'm writing it down. That was my very first sale. I was so happy to get the sale. It was the first dealer I called on, the first sale I got.
Awesome.
So it's like, wow, I guess I can do this.
Yeah. The brothers didn't slug it out in the parking lot?
They didn't come to blows that time. They had come to blows a number of times, but that time they didn't. The brother was swearing at me, just finally left. And the other one went inside, and I thought, I'm getting out while the getting's good. So in addition to being a salesperson, I was cheap counsel. It didn't cost anything to get advice from me. So I would do some of that. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a liability crisis in the business at the time. We carried, this is just, when I think back on it, it's like I have to be mistaken, but this is the way it was. We carried $1 million of insurance, products liability insurance. The premium was $500,000. That makes no sense. I mean, better you just let them come and try and squeeze blood from a penny. Except if we didn't have the insurance, we didn't have a bank. So we had no choice, and it was bleeding us. So one of my main goals was to clean up any of the product liability stuff that was still out there, design it out, shield it, warn against it, and be liberal with the warnings. And as we were developing products, we started working with a committee of people, and not formal, not the way John Deere does it, but we would get together and the designers, the sales guys, some of the field guys, and talk about how somebody's going to possibly get hurt on this machine and what we could do to prevent that. And just very practical conversations. And I thought very effective conversations. And I think most telling, when we started selling equipment to some of the majors later on, there was never a major change because of because they would all do their own safety audits. Because every product we made as an OEM manufacturer was identical to the product we made for our own dealers, with the exception of the color of the paint and some of the decaling. Safety decaling, all exactly the same. When John Deere started buying manure spreaders and came in with their people, and they do full day audits of it takes them a couple days to go over a spreader with all kinds of documentation and things like that. There was one spot where we had a shield that was clipped in place, and they thought the clip should have a lanyard on it so it didn't disappear. Very good idea. But I believe that was the most significant thing we changed. And when we changed it for them, we changed it for ourselves too, because it was a good idea. So I say that by way of saying our safety committee was effective. Then we would have our meetings in this room. We would talk about products. I think I played a major role in getting Heston as a customer and Gale as a customer. That probably increased my role. As I learned the business, I got more assertive, I'm sure. There were difficult times. You know, my father, my brother, and I would have some pretty strong disagreements, and it stretched the seams of family and friendship and love. We got through it. You know, the thing that amazed me is we would have these meetings, and we'd just absolutely disagree. And then later, I you know, when it's quiet and I'm driving or whatever, he had a point. I really ought to look at that. You know, it's when you're butting heads. Yeah. You stop hearing, but somehow I had the ability to remember what was said, and later on, I think he's right. Yeah. And I just kept taking on more of a role.
What year were you made president?
And look, I was still calling on dealers, and it made my job a little difficult. In fact, that's mostly what I was doing. I would say 90% of my time was calling on dealers. So somebody wants something special or something, and they would say, "Chris, you're president. You can just do it." Yeah. And my favorite line was, all that title means is more stuff is my fault. Yeah. That is all that means. Nothing else has changed. But it did get more difficult to turn them down. But the one thing I've found dealing with dealers and customers too is everybody understands what's fair. I mean, people scream and yell, get all excited, but if you offer them a resolution that's fair, not everybody, but most people will understand it. The biggest thing I always told our reps, well, and that's another evolution is as we started working with distributors, I was the one who would call on the distributors. As we worked with OEMs, I was the one who worked with OEMs. So I ended up working more shows in the other territories, and that probably brought me into a bigger role. But and got to know the families of the distributors, and very strong relationship.
Did you move more to two-step distribution then over time?
Just for the Dakotas. Well, not the Dakotas are actually dealers now, but Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, down through Texas. We tried it in the Southeast where we've never had really good luck. We tried it in Canada. And we've got various arrangements now, but our biggest distributors now are Kansas, Nebraska, and then down through Oklahoma and Texas, and then further west up into Montana. They're the same distributors we had with a couple minor changes when we started doing business with distributors. Okay. Major changes in Canada.
Yeah, who are the distributors you've been with a long time?
Well, Beaver Valley and Southwest General Implement, Midland. And, when I say with some minor changes, the territories they covered changed. There were some mergers out there, some consolidations.
Now, how are you different from Gary and Lori? What did you bring to the table that was different?
Part of my training as an attorney, I'm also a pilot. I'm always looking for the next thing that's going to go wrong. When I was an assistant AG, I think I'm not easily categorized. When I was an assistant AG, I did a number of cases involving tax protesters, the Posse Comitatus. I for a while, I would have a couple trials a week. I did them all in Madison. And these guys were far right-wing sort of guys. And the agents were telling me how much ammo they had, how much they were buying. This one group was buying more ammo than the Stevens Point Sporting Goods, which was a distributor for the state. The thing was, I kind of got along with these guys while I'm prosecuting them. I could talk with them. They weren't used to that. And that's why I say I'm not easily categorized. I convicted one guy. It was a misdemeanor. I convicted him on Christmas Eve. He was, or maybe it was the 23rd. It was close. He had long white hair, a long white beard. He came to court dressed in a red felt shirt. And when one of the witnesses was describing the person they were talking about on the stand, he described Santa Claus. And there he sat. After, when they were taking him down the hallway, when I came out of the courtroom, he tried to break free of the guards to get to me. And they were like pushing him back. And I said, no. I said, it's okay. And he came up and shook my hand and he said, you tried to talk me out of this. And I said, I sure did, Lawrence. And then they took him away and I turned around and his buddies were all there. And I just lit into him. I said, you got him into it. He's got an absolute right to bail pending appeal. Get his ass out of jail for Christmas Eve. And by God, they did. And they all show up at the Department of Justice. We're having our Christmas party. Back in those days, we had beer. We were, you could smoke in your offices, things like that. It was in the old Lorraine Hotel. We were on the 5th floor, and so they show up at the receptionist, and they call back and ask for me, and the receptionist says, "Chris, I think it's a bunch of posse guys." Mm-hmm. So I go walking out, and I see them there, and they got Lawrence. They got him out. I said, Lawrence, come on back. And they all started coming. I said, no, just Lawrence. I grabbed us a couple of beers as we were going through. We went into my office, closed the door, I gave him a beer, and we just visited. But when I started here, it was a number of years before I addressed the guys on the floor. I imagine it was Christmas or one of those holidays. But I had been in a lot of settings. I'd met with judges redrafting the Wisconsin Standard Criminal Jury Instructions. I'd argue cases in the 7th Circuit in Chicago. I'd been in every appellate court in this state, a number of federal courts, the Wisconsin Supreme Court. But the most intimidated I'd ever been was the first time I taught to the guys here. Because for some reason it struck me that this is real. And it's what was important for me in this company, and I know my dad and my brother and the rest of my family is the families that this company provides the income to. Their father, husband, whoever comes here every day, and they expect them to come home at night and to have a good living, and that always came through at our picnics in the summer. My absolute favorite thing.
What was that first speech you made to the troops here? What did you say?
It got to be kind of tradition at a couple times a year, and especially at Christmas. And I would kind of speak from the heart. And the picnics got to be the same. And we always we wanted to stand by our employees. And we had a number of them that got into trouble with us, with themselves, some substance abuse problems, some other things. And we just saw them through it. When this company was losing money very quickly back in, at 2 points in 2008 and 9 when the whole economy crashed, and ag was going great and then crashed deeper than the rest of the economy. And then after the lawsuit, and I was roundly criticized by the banks because we've always had a 5 or 6% profit sharing, which isn't profit sharing because we always pay it. And we burned through about a third of the stockholders' equity of this company, and we were still paying it out. And my attitude was, they're working as hard as ever. It's not their fault, but we were criticized quite a bit for that.
You went to law school, but when your dad asked you about returning, you said you thought you would someday. What was your dream as a young man on what you were going to do with your career?
Canoe at Hudson's Bay. I made it to James Bay. I was always looking north. And then when I went to law school, I was going to change the world. I always loved Lake Superior. One of the things that got me to go to law school was the whole reserve mining thing. I don't know if you remember that, and asbestos fibers in the lake. And for a while, years later, that was my case. And environmental law is a fine point whittled down to absolutely nothing in these cases that drag on for years and years and years and years. I did for a while. The state had me as a criminal prosecutor working environmental cases, egregious cases, intentional false filing, a sludge tank that was dumped into the Rock River in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. But I don't know that I had I'm going to be this.
Did you enter law school thinking you were going to be back with in the family business?
But after 8 years at Justice, I realized that, long-term, that's not for me. Private law with billing in 15-minute increments, that's not for me. Too restrictive. So it seemed like I say, I thought it was going to be like a retirement.
Yeah.
Instead, it was a trial that never ended.
Yeah. What am I missing? What's important about your story that I haven't asked you about?
Well, we've touched on it a number of times, but loyalty, people, handshake business. Done a ton of handshake business. And not just with distributors don't have a contract. Dealers don't have a contract. One of our major suppliers of a component, a rake wheel, is also our major competitor. And he and I have done handshake business for years. They have a guarantee on the sales, but it's not worth anything. It's been trust. Trusting us for over $1 million for months. Pay us in September. We're shipping now. I think that's very rare, and I wouldn't know how to do it again in this day and age. I think probably it couldn't be done. but it could then. And once you have those relationships, they endure.
Is this something that was always present in this company from the get-go?
Yeah. I think from the first orders my dad took where dealers had to put money down with the order. And it's always been a two-way street. It has to be. Obviously, there are outliers, there are exceptions. But people know when you're being fair with them, whether it's a customer or employee or a competitor, and when you're not. And I think they generally reply in kind.